This is Thierry Samlal for PMML. Today I want to present you market statistics for the month of July for the multifamily market in the province of Quebec. So we have a transactional volume which is extremely high right now. It's historically high, but if you compare it to last year at the same date, we have approximately $500 million worth of transactions less, but we've transacted 100 notarized transactions more. So more transactions, less volume. Why do we have that? Because we're selling more and more smaller buildings right now. The reason why is that there's not that many assets available over 25 doors on the market. There's a lot of transactions that took place, but a lot of portfolios that were sold. So if you're looking for a single 25, 30 unit asset, etc., they're harder to find. Therefore, the buyer owners which already have assets, which refinance their assets with mostly MLI and are back on the market right now, they have not much to choose from. Therefore, they're going towards smaller assets that they're buying, 12 units. For example, instead of buying a 25, buying two 12s, buying a 12 and a 6 unit close by. That's what's happening on the market these days. The average price per door for the whole province of Quebec, it's used to be $142,500 1 year ago per door. Now it's at an average of $160,000 per door. In average, that's including smaller units, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, etc., and studios. So the market is picking up quickly in value. The cap rates are decompressing. We're at approximately 4.43 in average for the whole province. We used to be closer to 4.23, so we've lost 0.2, which, if you're reading the cards right, it means that there are more and more buildings which are being sold which have already been partially optimized. Not completely, but partially, because the dry powder that you still have in buildings as far as rent increases has value in the market, and the buyers are willing to pay for that. And that was not the case maybe 6 or 7 years ago, but today it's the case. If you still have dry powder and rent room available on the possible net value that you can increase as far as rents, it's worth it to do the purchase. For Montreal, if we're looking at the volume, we shrunk about 14% in volume. The number, the dollar, as far as dollar sign, that's what was sold, is much less heavier than what we had last year. But the average price per door is almost $197,000 per door. And that's including assets of all types, which makes it really interesting. And when you're looking at the cap rate for Montreal, approximately we're at 4.3 of cap. So we're very, very, Montreal right now, cap rate wise, is a very stable market. But price per door wise is increasing very fast. Now, there's a lot of energy conversions that were done across time. Now we're going into the MLI program. We're pulling out all the equity we can of those buildings, and there's a lot more dry powder available. So a lot of buyers are looking at buying now, keeping the assets for 5 to 7 years, and then refinancing the first time in 5 years, and maybe after 7 or 8 years, getting their cash back and going to buy again for a second round, maybe 10 years from now. So that's where we're going. People are keeping their assets longer over time. I want to talk to you about regional transactions. A lot of people are leaving the city to go towards secondary markets where they can pick up assets which are much younger in age at an interesting price. For example, here I have 64 units sold in 4 different buildings, 16 units each, in Saint-Jean-sur-Richelieu, South Shore, Montreal. There's a military base there. It's a more or less industrial sector, and there's a lot of housing. Geographically speaking, Saint-Jean-sur-Richelieu is an amalgamation of different suburbs that were put together over time. And it's a large territory, so there's a lot of newer assets being built down there. And here we have an asset of 64 units, 4 buildings, $228,000 a door on average. Okay, so $228,000 a door is $100,000 cheaper than what it would cost me today to build the same asset with a 2018 date of construction, meaning that the asset, after, what's that, 5, 6, 7 years, is nicely stabilized and still doesn't have that CapEx expense that I need to put forward. If we continue in the same line of thinking, now we have a lot of assets being sold in Aylmer, Gatineau, close to Ottawa, and here we have a 15-unit building that was sold for close to $9 million. That's a huge price per door. It's extreme. So you're going to see a lot of these extreme numbers being, as far as new assets being sold, because once these assets meet cap rate requirements, they're still lucrative and interesting for the market. The market still looks at price per door, but looks at what's possible to buy, what's available, and where the assets can be brought in net revenue over time. Let's continue in the same line of thinking, and here I have another 2025 asset sold in Maniwaki, 32 units, sold for $234,375 per door. Really interesting price-wise. Secondary markets are also very popular in secondary suburban areas, which are being highly developed right now. I'm thinking about Drummondville and Victoriaville. Here I have an asset in Drummondville, 1980 construction, 4 buildings, 48 units, 12 units per building, sold for $154,167 per door. That's a really cheap price and really interesting for the market. If we're heading up to Three Rivers, Shawinigan, which is a suburb of Three Rivers, it's a secondary market. And here we have an asset of 74 doors in 6 buildings, sold for $100,000 per door. So if you have a smaller cash down, and if you want to buy a lot of buildings and a lot of doors, look at the secondary markets. Even if they're further away from where you live, if you have a manager with that critical amount of doors, well, then you could have it managed and your cash down is going to go way further on the price per door basis. Of course, the rents in the secondary markets are lower, but if you're offering a better lifestyle to the tenants coming in, and amenities and services and cleaner apartments and nicer looking buildings, well, then you could go get the higher rents in those areas. And that's what's happening on the market right now. Jonquière, which is up north, northeast in the Saguenay region, 48 units, sold for $124,167 per door. A really interesting price. The purchaser went for an alternative loan and locked in this deal to be able to get rid of the competition. It's a nice, stable area, and people are looking for better units in better shape in those areas. So if you're buying that asset, and you don't have to go into major renovations, you can stay really aesthetics and add to, you know, energy efficiency costs in those assets, change the water supply and heating systems in those buildings, and really go upgrade the lifestyle of the tenants and go get those high rents. If we're going back to Montreal, McGill ghetto, very close to the mountain, right next to the Molson football stadium, which belongs to McGill, right now in the McGill district, sorry. We're talking about 3660 Lorne Crescent, a small street. Here we have a 1936 asset, 5 stories, concrete, which is very rare for the age, 29 units, sold to Montreal Hotels and Suites. That's the purchaser. The seller was a Canadian company, but that's owned by a French company that's located in Paris. So an international buyer bought this years ago and now is selling back to Montreal Hotels and Suites. And basically, their way of operating, the buyer is offering short and mid-term units to tenants, which are going to be going to the university, of course, or you know, working downtown Montreal after they finish the university. So really interesting to see this transaction happened. And although this is a 1936 asset, it went for close to $436,000 per door. That's a huge price for an asset of that age. Apart from that, if I'm looking at nice heavy transactions in downtown in Montreal, we have a transaction that took place in Ville-Marie East, which is close to my offices here in downtown Montreal. 1959 construction, 8 units, sold for $318,750 a door. Another one in the Deschamps Street, 1870 construction, so that's a pretty up there in age. 10 units went for $341,000 per door. If you have a building well located, buy it. If it has a great location, if you have scale up possible on rent. So people are no longer looking at the price per door. They're looking at how much time could they pull back out their cash down of the assets. And if that is possible within a span of 10 years, 2 mortgage terms of 5 years each, well then people buy. And they detain on the midterm minimum 10 years. So I hope this information was of interest to you and it's going to be useful in all of your real estate adventures. And I'll see you next month for my next monthly report. Take care.